How's it? Morning, Monday morning. And it's been pretty interesting for me in my mental space. Yesterday I attended a Zoom meeting and I don't know, my mind is just struggling to understand the way that people think and the way that people look at things and the way that people perceive the world, During the course of this interview, this meeting, or could I call it class, one could pose certain questions and, I don't want to get into slating people but when I listened to the logic that was being employed, I found the argument to be relatively illogical. And the reason why I found it to be illogical is because I'm still waiting for an answer as to, what is the end game of this entire process. And it had to do with the way the world works and the elites and AI and all of that, And of course, when I pointed out that this thing was already pointed out 1,000, 2,000 years ago in the Bible, the presentation of a false God, the presentation of the ability to become immortal, the presentation to, in Genesis already, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for you will surely die. No, you shall not surely die. In fact, you shall be as gods yourself. Now, what makes you a God? Immortality, and this is why God actually kicked the people out of the garden, whatever that might have been, was to keep them away from consuming from the tree of life, and because they'd already consumed from the tree of the knowledge, you see. So, these ideas have been presented, and when I argued that point, the argument that I got back was that all religion, particularly Abrahamic religion, is man-made, created by the elites for the control of men. So, the first flaw there, and this is where this person lost me, is that someone would consider the three major religions all Abrahamic religions, which in fact they're not. They're actually not. Out of the three, two are Abrahamic religions. And if you really want to boil it down to the nitty-gritties, the only reason why the second one, Christianity, is called an Abrahamic religion is because Jesus Christ, according to the scripture, is born from the line of David, which comes from the line of Abraham. But the third religion really isn't an Abrahamic religion. It's an offshoot of Abrahamic religions. It was a religion that was created in opposition to Abrahamic religions, claiming to be an Abrahamic religion. But it isn't a true Abrahamic religion because there's absolutely no bloodline tie between their prophet and the patriarchal forefathers of the Abrahamic religions. So already there, I realized that this individual, as much as they want to believe they have so much knowledge on the topic, really don't. And this got me to thinking. And then earlier in the day, I'd watched a show called about Winston Churchill, and they quoted a poem. And so I went and looked this poem up. It's called Horatio. Let me just get it for you. Horatio at the Bridge, War Poetry. And it says this, I'm just going to read one chapter. It says, or one verse, it says, "Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?" And the point there is really, what are you living for? What are you fighting for? What are you striving towards? What is your life about? And we can make all this conjecture and speculation about who controls the world and what it's all about. And and all these types of things. But ultimately, I said to you guys the other day that my kids are overseas, right? Now, when I say my kids, you must understand, these are my stepkids. Okay? These are my stepkids. These are kids that were brought into my marriage, who I then took on as my own kids. But they were already teenagers when I met them, right? So the reality of the situation is I don't have kids. I have grandkids through these kids, but I don't have kids. Now, why don't I have kids? People often ask me that question, Dave, why don't you have kids? And I will tell you, because as a young man and a kid myself, I went through some stuff. And I saw some horror, my friend, horror shows. Okay? And I myself realized that at that time in my life, I myself was a horror show. And my thinking at the time, right or wrong, was I am not going to subject another human being to what I've just lived through and what I see and what I experience every day, particularly as it regards what people do to children. And I know how I felt. I knew how I felt about life at that time. Living in fear constantly, fear of death, fear of poverty, fear of everything, fear, absolute fear, no connection to God. And I said, why would I want to bring someone into this world to experience what I'm experiencing, which is, at that time, my viewpoint was an absolute curse. An absolute curse. So why would I want to curse another human being like this by bringing them into this world? That's how I used to think, right? Now, I've got lots of friends with children. People like having children, right? And I watch how they interact with their children, and I watch what these kids go through, and pretty decent people, pretty decent upbringing, pretty decent life. And I always get to thinking, okay, what is the purpose of all of this? Okay, and I'm talking now purely from a godless viewpoint. What is the purpose? So if there's no God and religion is all man-made and all of that stuff, right? What is your purpose? Why are you having children? There's no answer without God. You say procreate to continue the species. Okay, you want to continue the species of humanity. Why? Why do we want to continue the species of humanity? If you look around the world today, does it look like humanity is doing a great job? Do you think humanity is succeeding in its ownership of this planet, in its ownership of what we're doing to the world? Does it look like humanity should be saved from a evolutionary scientific perspective? Can you show me what humanity has done positive for planet Earth? You see, now we start getting into it. Now you got to start getting to there must be certain concepts that are applicable. And the main concept is, and this is what I brought to the table yesterday, and I'm still awaiting the answer, right? Is there such a thing as good and evil? Outside of theological explanations, are there the concepts of good and evil? Are there the concepts of love and hate? And if so, then where do these concepts come from, and why do we even have these concepts? I watched on TV, and I'm going to try and shorten this up. I watched on TV the other night an eagle catch a small springbok or impala, take it up into a tree, and just hold on to it until it died, and then it ate it, right? A vegan's dream, of course. But is that... And I saw people, it's so sad to watch this poor little thing, And I started thinking, is that eagle evil? Is it evil? Does it understand the concept of evil? No, the eagle is hungry. and so it kills in order to not be hungry and feed its own young. Okay? That's the way of nature. Right? So, if at times killing is not evil, right, in the natural world, let me go deeper, let me go further. Does that eagle even understand the concept of good and evil? Does it understand concepts of right and wrong? No, it does not. So why do you, and where does it come from? Okay? And this is something that people just can't seem to answer. You know, you can see the effects of evil, you can see the effects of good, you can see the effects of love, you can see the effects of hate, but you cannot actually show those concepts under a microscope. So in reality, if you can't show them under a microscope and you can't test them scientifically, then do they exist or do they not exist? And this is where the concept of faith comes in, okay? Just because you cannot see and touch and feel God does not mean God does not exist. Because you can see the results of God. You can see the results of God in people's living. If you take the type of human being I was a couple of years ago versus what I am now, it's literally two different people. Literally. That look the same, that talk the same, but whose outlooks are completely and utterly different. Now, how is that measurable and quantifiable if everything is just bullshit? And if everything is just BS, right? All this religion stuff and all this belief stuff, then what is your reason for being here? What is your children's reason for being here? What are they doing here? Is it their job just to consume, procreate, and those things that they procreate, to consume, procreate, up until the end, until eventually there's so many people that there's nothing left to eat, nothing left to drink, and nothing left to breathe? Is that the whole idea of creating a better world, creating a better life, creating all these things that we're supposedly creating for our children? If there is no ultimate end game, then it's all a waste of time. And that is exactly what Horatio is saying there. If you are living and dying for something, there's only two things in his mind that are worth living and dying for: the memories of the ancestors and what they hoped for, and the temples of our gods. Because without those things, life is purposeless. It's purposeless. You're running around trying to make a living for people, your children, who are also just going to run around and try and make a living for people, their children, who are also just going to run around. It's a merry-go-round, and it's pointless unless there's some design and purpose to the entire thing. It had a beginning, and at some point it's got to have an end. And we, as believers, are working towards that end. That end is the fulfillment of prophetic scripture. And this is the last point I want to make. Please, if you want to have an argument with me, or you want to bring something to the table, not an argument, just bring something to the table that will make me really think, okay? Please come with a bare minimum for me of the same level of academic integrity that has been bestowed upon the the academic criticism that has been on particularly the Bible for the last 1400 years through scholars worldwide, both religious, both unreligious, and yet today it still stands as the most valid historical ancient text in history now. In history now. If you don't believe in the Word, then you can't believe in Aristotle, you can't believe in Plato, and you can't believe in any of those guys, because their works are prior to the Bible. And there is less available. There's more available to prove the existence of a God than there is to prove the existence of Aristotle and Plato. Think about that. Have a lekker day. But also, if you're gonna hold lessons and people bring a completely perspective view, to shout them down, okay, and not argue the point that they bring, because you believe something else, not because what you believe is in fact. What was presented last night is not a fact. What was presented last night was someone's belief. And I know it was someone's belief because at no point during the course of the entire lecture was any supporting documentation, any academic criticism, anything like that presented in the lecture. And understand that sometimes when you're lecturing to people who are academically proficient and have heard many, many arguments. Lekker. Last thing is this. If you want to prove that religion is man-made, then prove it. Don't tell me it's so without bringing the proof. Okay. God bless. Cheers.